Well, welcome to Nurture the Soul, beloved beings. I am your host today, the Reverend Ellie Hutchison, and I am the Minister for Congregational and Community Engagement with the Faith Info team. And we are part of the Love of Church at the national setting of the United Church of Christ. I use they, them pronouns and have a blonde pixie haircut. I'm wearing large gold rimmed glasses with brass spiral earrings and a green silk blouse. Nurture the Soul is a weekly webinar series that provides our local churches and faith practitioners with a multitude of practical, educational, innovative, and formational resources to engage with the critical topics facing our communities right now. This webinar centers curiosity and care towards collective liberation for all of God's creation. We feature guest theologians, preachers, authors, community members, cultural artists, and thought leaders to delve deeply into the topics that help us live into a gospel that is alive at this time. Beloveds, we hope that this virtual space is a space for connection that cultivates a curious and loving community, because we believe that these are key in the journey alongside our still speaking God. And so we invite you every Thursday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Nurture the Soul, and from time to time, look for special offerings. You can find a full list of all of our digital program offerings at ucc.org/events or on any and all of our social media platforms. You can view the complete Nurture the Soul playlist on YouTube at the link that will be placed into chat. And if you are interested in participating or have an idea or you'd like to see something and get to know more about, please feel free to reach out to me via the email address that was used to remind you of today's webinar. And beloveds, if these conversations move you, if what's offered here helps to enhance your ministry or even nurtures your soul, we hope that you consider donating to the annual fund of the United Church of Christ by texting the letters UCC to the numbers 41444. These small tokens have huge impacts in helping us resource you and your community in innovative and engaging ways. We thank you for supporting us and for being with us today. But before I introduce this week's guest, I'd like to remind you that we have two features that you will find at the bottom of your screen, and we encourage you to use both today. The first is the chat feature. We hope that you share where it is that you're zooming in from, your faith tradition if you have one, and then of course the Q&A feature, as we will have an opportunity at the end of today's webinar to address your questions to our guests. Both of those items can be found again at the bottom of your screen. They look like dialogue bubbles. The Q&A one has a question mark in the middle, and the chat one has the ellipses, the three dots in the middle. And now I want to welcome to the screen. We're going to be in conversation. I'm so excited for this. This is a multi-part series with some of the authors and the editors of the text Rooted in Faith and Justice. Christian Calls to Conscience for Cries and Peace in Palestine, and it's published by Chalice Press. And this is part one of this longer series with these folks and many others that we're going to be delving deeper throughout 2025. So I welcome our guests onto the screen today. Welcome, Krista, welcome, Becca, and welcome, Peter. So good to have you all today. I apologize in advance. I have a rambunctious puppy that is just gnawing on me. So if you see me moving around a lot, I apologize for that today. But welcome, Krista, Becca, and Peter. How are you? How do you find your soul at this moment today? We'll start with Peter since he's unmuted.
Well, thank you so much, Ellie, for the opportunity to be together in this space. It's a privilege, and we're really grateful for your hosting this conversation, which we hope will be edifying and educative for our audience. I'll say that it's been a very unusual and busy week. As the audience may have been following the administration's directions related to the Middle East and particularly Gaza this week following the press conference that President Trump held with Prime Minister Netanyahu. There's a lot there to talk about and unpack, but I'll say too that the last 16 months have been especially intense. Engagement on Middle East issues has not let up for that time and even longer, as we can talk about as it relates to the history of the region and our church's engagement. But it's just been a very intense year and a half or so.
Thank you for sharing, Peter. Yeah. Becca and Krista, how are you doing today?
Yeah, like many, it's been a long, not even a month. It's been a long couple months. But I am always given hope by the work that our global partners are doing. And so in a lot of ways, this work that I do in particular is difficult work. And it's a lot of work this time of of life, but it's also work that fills my soul in a lot of ways as well. So there's the difficult pieces to it, but then I really do get to see the work that our partners do in the world, and it's amazing and wonderful, great work. So I'm holding both of those things at the same time today,
Yeah.
at least.
Yeah, we can hold both. We can be multiple things at one time, right? Yeah, thank you, Becca. And Krista, how is your soul today?
Oh, just echoing much of what Becca and Peter have said, just challenging weeks now, challenging year plus. But just trying to find that balance between rest and rejuvenation to be prepared to continue to do the work that needs to be done. And I'll say getting a chance to work on this book this last year has been really meaningful, and being able to help to create something that we hope will be of use.
Yeah, I want to thank you too, Krista, for bringing that up. You all have been working so hard over the last year of compiling so many great thought leaders throughout the world into this text. And so I just want to recognize and congratulate you all for that effort. I know how hard it is just to get one meeting on the calendar. And alas, you all have gotten many meetings on your calendars planning for this. But I'd love to delve into some questions. We'll be able to go much deeper into this text throughout 2025. But I'm really curious at how it came about. But before we do that, for those of us who are new to the United Church of Christ or the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, or are watching who aren't affiliated with the denominations represented here today, can you share a bit about who Global Ministries is and what our history with the Palestinian people as partners has been?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ellie, because Global Ministries, I think, is one of the best kept secrets in a lot of ways. So, Global Ministries is unique in that it is two different church denominations that have come together to do our global mission work. There's no other, at least that I'm aware of, Protestant denominations that are doing global mission work in this joint manner. So, this is the United Church of Christ and the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. We've been partners in a lot of different ways over the years, and Global Ministries is one way in which we live out our commitment to shared partnership. So let's see if I can remember. We're coming up on a 30-year anniversary for Global Ministries, if I'm remembering correctly, of officially having this constituted. We've worked on global mission prior to that together as the two churches, and of course, both of our churches have a long history of global mission work dating back to the 1800s. But Global Ministries is a newer creation and that inherits all that predecessor work. But we actually have about, is it almost 300 partners, 200 partners, 300 partners, 290 partners in about 90 different countries. And these partners they run the range of things. They're church partners, they're ecumenical partners, they're nonprofit organizations, they're hospitals, they're educational institutions, they are programs that serve children without families. There are all kinds of different programs that cover a wide range of issues all over the world. So any issue that you're interested in that affects your local community, we probably have a global partner working on that issue in their local communities as well. And like I said before, there's some amazing work being done in small, little community impacted ways, right? Our partners are not these huge organizations or instruments. They're small, they're based in their communities, they're doing a lot of great work. And I'll let Peter talk about our history of partnership with our Palestinian partners, but that's kind of Global Ministries in a brief nutshell.
Thank you, Becca. Yes, for sure. We're in 2026, actually, we'll be celebrating 30 years of the joint endeavor of Global Ministries. But as you said, Becca, Global Ministries brings together the histories of mission of the two churches. And so going back to 1819, when the first congregational missionaries left Boston for the Middle East, that's the genesis, really, of congregational or UCC mission history in the region. Two young people, young ministers were commissioned by the American Board of Commissioners for Foreign Missions to serve in the region. And they first went to Malta and then eventually to Smyrna, which is modern day Izmir in Turkey, and then south to Beirut and on to Jerusalem before going back north. So the first congregational missionaries were in 1819, and the first disciples missionary was appointed in 1851 to serve in Jerusalem. And that person was a medical doctor, but also had some ideas about the second coming of Christ and identified as a Christian Zionist, which is something that we talk about in the book. So our understanding of mission has changed significantly over these 2 centuries. And our engagement with partners is now one that focuses on mutuality and accompaniment and solidarity and presence with. And so we engage with partners, supporting their work, standing with them in times of crisis and in times of joy. And receiving from them the witness that they offer, not only in their own communities, but to the world. And that's consistent with how we've engaged with Palestinian partners. We have a number of Palestinian Christian partners. We also have a relationship with an Israeli Jewish organization, B'Tselem, the Israeli Center for Human Rights in the Occupied Territories. But a number of our partners among the Palestinian Christian community include the Department of Service for Palestinian Refugees of the Middle East Council of Churches, an organization we've worked with since the 1960s at least. It's an organization that was established in 1948 and 49 at the time of the Nakba, the catastrophe that Palestinians experienced, the massive displacement of 750,000 Palestinians. We also engage with the YMCA and the YWCA, as well as with the Episcopal Diocese of Jerusalem and the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Jordan and the Holy Land. We engage with Sabeel. We engage with Kairos Palestine. And so a number of partners that we engage with. And, I have just actually recently returned from the region last week, a couple weeks ago now, and had the opportunity in that short trip to engage with a number of those partners. So that's not an exhaustive list, but it's just a sampling of the partners that we engage with there. It's important for us to center their voices and to hear what they are telling us, because they offer a perspective that isn't normally available through mainstream media. And the connections we have with the Palestinian Christian community and others afford us the opportunity to hear perspectives that we don't often hear.
And that's why we deliberately asked some of our Palestinian Christian partners to contribute to this book. So you'll see, and we'll probably get into it, but you'll see some chapters are written by individual partners. And we thought that that was important when writing this book, to hear directly from them.
Yeah, thank you. Krista, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Oh, I think they've covered it very well. I just say sometimes we ask our partners, what are some of the best ways we can accompany you? Is it by providing grants? Is it by sending a volunteer or a mission coworker? And sometimes partners will say it's through advocacy, and it's through going back and talking to your own governments and telling the stories and providing that bridge. Because what I'm clear this week more than ever, what our government does in the U.S. Really has impacts in the region. And so that's an important part of our ministry too.
Yeah, indeed. And I hear, Peter has mentioned in previous conversations as well as today, it's just, the advocacy that takes the form of what our mainstream media does not cover for all of the reasons, right? And so being able to uplift the voices of those directly impacted while also providing care. I know that Global Ministries is a caring partner in this work. It's something, it's not just flying in and having one kind of mentality. It's actually doing long sustaining embedded work to bring peace and love into the communities. And so I want to just thank you all for that work as well. And thinking a little bit about the times that we find ourselves in, and I can go back many, many years about this now, is how sensitive how difficult it is to talk and engage around sensitive topics. And so I'm curious for each of you to share, if you feel compelled to, how hard was it to decide to write and edit this book? And perhaps share maybe some of the reasons why or what came up in the midst.
Just in terms of process, we were lucky. We didn't pull together a book proposal and try to pitch it. It was Chalice Press and their publisher Brad Lyons who came to Global Ministries and said, I think there's a voice that needs to be heard that isn't out there. I think Global Ministries and our churches, our denominations, partners have a unique voice and perspective here. It isn't what you hear when you turn on the news about the Middle East, and so that started a conversation that we're really grateful for.
If I could just add, one thing that Global Ministries attempts to do, as I said earlier, is to center the voices of our partners. So how do we help our congregations and our members have access to those voices in easy ways? So it really wasn't a difficult decision, as Krista said. The idea of communicating the voices of our partners is something that we do for all of those partners around the world, for our local churches and members. So this really was an opportunity and an invitation, we felt, to expand the reach of our partners in our context. And so far, I understand that the book has been received well. So we're grateful for that and hope that it can continue to be a resource.
Yeah, and we were really lucky in that it wasn't really difficult to write either, because the three of us have a lot of this knowledge based on our years of work with Global Ministries. Krista went as a global mission intern to Palestine. Peter's been doing this work for what, 25 years now, Peter? And so we all have extensive experience in this. So it really was about putting some of that, figuring out how we wanted to shape it, what we thought was the important topics to share. So this is definitely more of I think Peter's referred to it as it's a 201 level. It's not a 101. It's not an intro, but it's also not really super advanced. So, getting some of the basics down and the basic concepts out there. And then our partners who we asked to contribute to this were really quite responsive and got back to us really quickly. So the writing of this book didn't actually take all that long. Of course, it's the editing of it. So I think Chalice approached us in December of 2023, so just a few months after the Hamas attacks on October 7th. It took us a little bit to get going, but it was out in the world a year later, and that's pretty incredible timing wise for getting a book out. So we really, I mean, the work our partners contributed, the three of us, and Global Ministries, and the work that Chalice helped us with, they were a really great partner in all of this.
That is so good to hear. And for those who may be new to writing, publishing, and editing, that is a rarity. And so the fact that I think it speaks a lot to the dedication that you all have had to these topics and issues for the amount of time that you've had, right? And even beyond that, the relationships that you have cultivated in the time that you've had to be in community alongside folks. And so, again, super grateful for that. I do want to talk a little bit about the title and the image of the cover, and I'll hold mine up here so you can see. I would like to offer if one of you could give a visual description of what this book looks like for those who may be visually impaired. Can you talk about the title and the description that we see on the book's cover?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Ellie. So first of all, the title, which you have read, Rooted in Faith and Justice. This and the subtitle is Christian Calls for Conscience and Cries for Peace in Palestine. So it's deliberately written by Christians, and that includes our Palestinian Christian partners centrally. The Palestinian Christian community is about 1% of the overall Palestinian population. And so a tiny community, relatively speaking. There are many Palestinian Christians living in diaspora as well around the world, and they have been living around the world for centuries, really. But we wanted to center Palestinian Christian voices and to offer their witness on their situation as well as how they engage with it. So rooted is really, it's the first word in the title, and that gets to the question of the faith, of several questions. One is the faith aspect. Palestinian Christians are rooted in their faith and trace and are proud of their lineage going back to the very first Christian communities. Christianity, of course, started there, and Palestinian Christians are very proud that they live in the places where Jesus was born and offered his ministry, and eventually was crucified and resurrected. So the places of the Bible, the places of the original, Christian story are places where the Palestinian Christians are from. They're also rooted in the principle of justice, and that is what they see as their biblical call, and we share that with them. So the message of the Hebrew prophets and the message of Christ's teaching are also part of what the authors, all of us, are rooted in. And also, I think it's important just to think about the rootedness in the land. This is an especially central concept for Palestinians, including Palestinian Christians. There's a deep connection to the land and the places where they live and have lived for generations. And I think we're seeing that actually as we watch the hundreds of thousands of Palestinians return to the north of Gaza after having been displaced in the last 16 months. We've heard them say, we would rather live and die here than go somewhere else. It's a deep connection, a deep rootedness in the land. You also asked about the cover photo. The cover image is one that is provided by Dar el-Kalima University, another of our partners. It was founded by the Reverend Dr. Mitri Rahib, who is a Palestinian Christian Lutheran pastor and president of Dar el-Kalima University. In the foreground of the picture, you see a field, an olive orchard, an olive tree orchard with the green, the plush green, and oftentimes we don't think of the Middle East being green, but this is a picture of a green field with olive trees rooted in the soil. The olive tree, of course, is an image that connotes Palestinian connection to the land. It's a symbol of peace. It's an economic issue for Palestinians. Olive trees and the harvest of olives is also providing sustenance. So olive oil, olives themselves, olive soap. So just the idea of being literally rooted. In the background, you see the separation barrier, the wall that Israel began constructing in 2002 to separate Palestinians from Israelis. Israelis call it a security wall. Palestinians have called it an apartheid wall. So it also introduces the political and geographic realities on the ground there. And behind the wall, you see some buildings, which include churches, and you can see the crosses on top of some of those churches. So, you know, a connection to the Christian community there, and a visual of the reality that Christians do live there, worship there, offer witness there as well. We thought it was a beautiful picture that brought together a lot of meaning, and thanks for the opportunity just to share a little bit about it.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much. And I know that image is not popping up. And so we'll be sure to include a link for the image. At least it's not on my end. It might be on other folks. But thank you for that. Thank you very much for the visual description of what it is that we see, and for going back to talk about what rooted means for folks that are from a land, from a place. And I think that maybe a much deeper conversation for another time is it is the connection to land and how much that has been a motivation, right, for what has been happening in that area since then. For me, I want to say that as somebody who has found themselves in the facilitation role for many, many years, I found that this book was written and designed as an excellent entry point into what you say in the book is this really complex topic that sometimes when the topics get too big, we don't know where to start, right? But I find that you did such a really, really good job at writing and designing this book so that way we're invited into the conversation and the discussion and not shying away from it. And then I'm really just curious at how did you decide to go about that? Like, why was the book written in that way? And if you can talk about, I'm going to let you explain a little bit more of why I'm asking that question, perhaps. And then what advice can you give folks in wanting to do their own book study within their own circles?
Who wants to start? Well, I think for us, we really wanted to make this accessible to the ordinary person in the pews who might be really overwhelmed by this topic and not really know where to start. I mean, we know we have folks who are really engaged on this issue and have traveled to the region and have been deeply engaged, and we hope that there were also ways that they can access this, but this is really meant to give kind of an introduction. And so as we were thinking about how we wanted to structure this book, we thought it would be really great to do a topic in each chapter and be really basic and get the facts and the basic premise down, and then offer some questions for reflection and discussion at the end of that chapter. And then at the very end of the book, we have a more reading section. So if you found yourself curious about one of the topics in particular, you can go and then in that section see, okay, I'm interested in Christian Zionism. Here are a couple other books that I might start with to really dive more in depth. So this is not meant as a real in-depth piece. And in fact, several of our partners who contributed chapters have written multiple books on the topics that they talked about in this chapter. So yeah, it's really meant as a starting point. It's really meant as a place for you as the reader to see what grabs hold of you, where you're interested in learning more about. And from there, as I said, I mean, this has been going on for decades. There are many people who have written many books on many parts of this subject and area. So I think we were hoping for a starting point that grounds us in our scriptures. So also at the beginning of each chapter, we have a scripture verse that you can ground your reading in. And so that we wanted to, as Peter said, root ourselves in our faith, and then root ourselves in some facts and some history and some, just basic outline of things.
And there are 5 sections, and so we hope it might be a good fit for a 5 to 6 week book study. I'm grateful to see a few folks online here from Tapestry Church in Bargersville, Indiana, which is my congregation, who's planning to do a book study on Rooted in Faith and Justice starting after Lent. And so we're looking at doing a 6-week study, and you can see that each of the 5 sections, it starts with a quotation from Munther Isaac's Easter homily. And so we're planning on the first section to watch a version of his homily and then break it up into the 5 sections and know there's discussion questions for each and perhaps a chance to, connect with a partner or a Global Ministries staff member as a resource. And so I'm grateful for this congregation who was one of the co-sponsors of the Compelled to Witness resolution at General Assembly 2 years ago. And in doing that, said we're committed to wanting to learn more about this and using this book as a tool to do that.
And if I could just add, as Becca mentioned, libraries have been written on Israel and Palestine from a variety of angles: theological, economic, political, historical, you name it, it's been written. There's so much out there. One of our hopes is to provide access for those who may be intimidated by all of that apparent complexity. This is perhaps one of the most intellectualized issues in the world. And we want to help convey that at its core, these are pretty straightforward issues, and they are accessible to anyone. So we urge people not to be intimidated by it, but to engage and to study it. I think our Palestinian Christian partners also tell us for them it's not complicated. It's an issue of justice, and their struggle is based on that. So we hope to convey that there are some basic principles that are easily accessible, and that our audience is not overly intimidated by all this history and layers of history.
Well, and it's a slim book, right? I don't know if you could show the side edge, Ellie. It's, just over 100 pages or something like that. So it's not overwhelming either in size. And each chapter is relatively short, so you can easily break it up into small, digestible chunks. So that's another way that we were trying to make it more accessible to folks.
Yeah, I love at the end of each chapter, there's a series of discussion questions that go from the easy to the not so easy questions, right? And then I love that it is broken into the 5 sections that you had shared. But I also like at the end of the book that you made sure in the appendix to put calls to action, further reading, right? And so there's the limitless libraries. writings that have been done. But you also talk about the synod's the resolutions that came across. So we have, in Appendix B is the 2021 UCC General Synod resolution for the declaration for a just peace between Palestine and Israel. And then Appendix C talks a little bit about the 2023 Disciples General Assembly resolution. Can you talk a little bit about why you thought it was important to include those? And then I want to invite those who have yet to ask a question into chat. There are some questions that we will get to that are delving a lot deeper than the surface conversation about how this book came about. And I'm glad to see that. But if we can talk a little bit about those resolutions and why it was important.
Who would like to start on that one? I'd be happy to do that. So the history of General Synod and General Assembly engagement on this actually goes back to 1967 for the United Church of Christ and 1973 for the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. We've been engaged from a Synod and Assembly point of view for decades, and that's a significant engagement. We have many resolutions on Israel and Palestine from each of the two bodies, and that is an expression of our engagement with this issue, which has been with us for such a long time. And there is a chapter in the book, chronicling that Synod and Assembly position evolving and development. So we encourage readers to just look into some of that history. But the 2021 resolution at the UCC General Synod and the 2023 resolution at the Disciples General Assembly are significant shifts in the way that the two churches have engaged this issue. For one thing, they move our churches away from a proscriptive approach, which before 2021 and 2023, respectively, the two churches supported a two-state solution. We recognize that the two-state solution is practically impossible to implement because of the expansion of settlements and the realities on the ground. So moving away from a proscriptive approach to a rights-based approach. And this focuses on the rights of the Palestinian people in international law and from a moral point of view. So we recognize, both churches recognize the theological urgency of this issue and the importance of focusing on the rights of the people, which also humanizes the issue. So it's not just an intellectual exercise. It's about people. So that those resolutions also were places where our church's bodies named the reality on the ground as apartheid. And so we were among the first North American and European denominations to do that. Although our Palestinian Christian partners and Palestinians have been talking about the apartheid that they live in for decades. So that's not new, but for our churches, it was a significant shift. We also named that the oppression of Palestinians is sin. So churches have the moral and theological grounding to speak in that way, and it's important that we took that step and named the oppression of Palestinian people as sin. So really, in a nutshell, it's the shift toward a rights-based approach, and so those two are significant foundations as we go forward. Rejecting anti-Semitism, rejecting Islamophobia, rejecting any ideology that discriminates against people, and affirming the rights of all people. And these are based in Hebrew scriptures and in the Christian gospel. So drawing on our faith and drawing on our engagement and listening to our partners, and our partners are quoted in those resolutions. Our churches came to this place and assert these positions. I would say that the votes in both Synod and Assembly were overwhelming. So there was good discussion in the plenary sessions and in the UCC's case, the committee, but the votes were very clear and left no space for doubt.
And to talk a little bit about why those resolutions are important is because the way that our polity is structured, the way our two churches are structured, is that the national settings of our two churches cannot do things that are not prescribed in General Synod actions. So by switching this language and switching and having these resolutions means that Global Ministries and the United Church of Christ and the Christian Church Disciples of Christ have this approval, these policy backings from the general body of the church that is our governing body to do this work. And that is an important piece for us at the national level to do this work. As some of you know, each church can do kind of whatever they want, but the General Synod and the General Assembly are our main policy-making bodies for the denomination as a whole, which is important for the work that all three of us do as national staff members in our respective denominations.
Yes, I want to get into some of these questions, and thank you for that. Somebody wrote, can you speak to the challenges of making these resolutions effective? Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, first of all, I would say that the resolutions were received positively and with deep appreciation by our partners in the region, and that's important. So, the General Assembly and General Synod are not only speaking to the disciples in UCC, but also offering a public witness in the world. So we're on record, and it was noticed. So that's important. And I don't say that to be self-congratulatory, but just to share the response that we've received. Of course, there has been some pushback, but because this is an issue that inspires passion and deeply held opinions. So we recognize that, but they were well received by partners, and also has enabled us to speak, as Becca said, in advocacy settings and to speak in our churches about the realities in ways that reflect what our partners are saying. These resolutions help us to interpret the reality in a way that's consistent with what our partners are saying.
And in that is a call to further education and calling upon the church to wrestle with these issues. And I think working on this book, we hope that it will be a resource for that continuing education. And to say we are two of the first denominations to take some of these stances. So it is also significant in that way.
Yeah, that is so important, and really a nice segue into our next question that came through. And thank you all for this. Can you speak to the connections between Jewish Zionism, Christian Zionism, and Muslims in Palestine?
Shall I start? And we'll see where we go. Yeah, that's a really, really good and important question. One of our authors in this book is the Reverend Dr. Mitri Raheb. And so as you read this book, pay attention to how he talks about decolonization. In his writings, he focuses on expanding the understanding of Christian Zionism. Christian Zionism traditionally is understood as a theology that reads scripture literally and understands that certain events need to take place in order for Christ to come again. They're called dispensations. So Christian Zionism is sometimes referred to as dispensationalism. Dispensations are those events that need to take place in order for Christ to come again. And so Christian Zionists are supportive of Israel partly, in large part, to help along the second coming of Christ, to help those dispensations happen. And one of those dispensations is the ingathering of Jews in biblical Israel. So supporting Israel means helping these steps happen in order to facilitate the second coming of Christ. Of course, we don't know when that will happen. We don't know. We just don't know. And Christ even tells us that, and the scriptures tell us that we will not know. So beyond the traditional understanding of Christian Zionism, Mitri Raheb, the Lutheran pastor that I mentioned before, talks about expanding the understanding of Christian Zionism to any Christian support for Israel. And so Christian Zionism historically predates Zionism, Jewish Zionism, which emerged in the late 19th century in Europe. But Christian Zionism predates that. But modern Christian Zionism, dispensationalism, as well as others, means that there are Christians who support Israel, whether they're dispensationalist or not. One example could be the former president, President Joe Biden, who said publicly, you don't have to be Jewish to be Zionist, and he identified as Zionist. He's Catholic, of course, and not dispensationalist. So there is a relationship between Zionism and Christian Zionism, and there are differing levels of awareness about Christian Zionism in the region. So, for example, because evangelical Christians who are Christian Zionists tend to have opportunities to speak in media, oftentimes they are seen as the representation of Western Christianity or Western Protestant Christianity. The reality is, of course, there are others of us who don't support the theology of Christian Zionism and have been critical of Israel's policies. So part of the problem is that all Christians are painted with a particular brush because some have the public space. And so there is a relationship, and the Christian world is to some extent misunderstood. But we also know that Christian Zionism is existing not only in England and in the US, where the movement began really, but also in other parts of the world. And part of that has to do with mission. And we can talk about that if you'd like in more depth.
I love that. Yes, we are going to continue to have that conversation, but I do want to get back to an earlier question that was asked. As appropriate, can you share a bit of the invitation process and responses and conversations that might be of interest? Thinking more along the lines of, did you ask anyone to write who was resistant or declined to do so?
Oh, no, I don't think so. All of our partners are very active in advocacy and very active. You might see, if you've been following things recently, like Reverend Dr. Munther Isaac, who's one of our writers, he's been all over the BBC. He's done lots of media appearances. All of our partners are our Palestinian partners, I'll be clear about that, have been more than willing to talk about their experiences in a variety of fora and ways. And even some of the chapters were adapted from other writings, but no, they were all very eager.
Hmm.
And I'll say that the way that they describe their own realities and the language that they use to do that, it was important to us to keep that language. And we appreciate, again, Chalice Press for being supportive in that, because, it's using words like genocide, saying it's a war on Gaza. This language, it's careful and it's intentional, it's on purpose. And we're grateful that the way our partners wrote these chapters is the way that they appear in the book.
I love that. I wanted to just commend you all. I know that was a question that I was going to ask to talk about the courage, right? Since there is a lot of nuance and really let's be real, so much misunderstanding and misinformation around what this conflict and genocide has been. I will say that I was so pleasantly surprised at reading the language and found it very courageous when working in a lot of circles and faith communities here in my own area about how people have tiptoed around that language and, oh, we can't say that or we can do this. And so the fact that you did was really important. And I think, Krista, you highlighted the importance of using the language that the people who are directly impacted have used and continue to do so. Would you like to add anything else onto that, or are we good there?
I would like to just say that, really, so for example, 2 weeks after October 7th, the Middle East Council of Churches used the word genocide. And other Palestinian partners also used the word genocide very early in these past 16 months. The UCC and Disciples leadership issued statements in July and September, respectively, using the word genocide after much discernment. And listening to partners. So these are not easy decisions, but we also consider centrally the voices of our partners in these kinds of determinations.
And again, it goes back to offering a different narrative than what you see in the media, right? You hear people talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We don't use that. We talk about, violence, or, we use different terms, but because the word conflict implies two equal sides, and this is not an equal-sided conflict, right? So we're very intentional in our language usage for a variety of ways and a variety of reasons. But I wanted to highlight that in particular. Like, we don't call it the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. That is not a terminology that we use because it denotes equality in some level where there just isn't.
I love it. I just want to say that's fire. Thank you, everybody, for that lingo. Well, a question that came through, it said, how have we been affected by the recent Elon Musk defunding US aid?
I'll speak to that quickly because that's been some part of my work. So I guess we didn't introduce ourselves earlier, but I'm the Minister for Global Advocacy and Education. So that is right in my work space. But so USAID doesn't fund Global Ministries. So Global Ministries itself and our two denominations have not been affected. And as far as I have heard, none of our partners have been directly affected. Most of our partners are relatively small, so they wouldn't receive all of the USAID money that gets sent out, but they might have received grants from other organizations that do receive USAID funding. We still haven't fully sussed out the impact on our partners. But just as far as I know, at this point, none of our partners receive money directly from USAID, but they might be because most of the organizations that do receive USAID funding are larger, but they might be an implementing partner in a local community or have a specific project that's been funded by a larger organization in their country, for example. So at this point, we're still trying to see what's happening, but no immediate impact, I'll put it that way. But it's still concerning to us, of course, because we believe that foreign aid is a good thing. I hope I don't have to say that.
And thinking about the way that you all set up the book, right, with the questions, with the ways to become active, and with the fire hose of things, like where you're on that fire end of the fire hose of things that are happening, things are changing incredibly fast. How do congregations stay aware? Like, where can we tune in to find ways in which to stay engaged and involved in the work the way that you invite us to do so in the book?
Great. I'm happy to respond to the question. We're living in an age when traditional mainstream media is less relied upon. People are using social media a whole lot more. These last 16 months, this genocide has been live streamed. People are saying, in terms of following news and updates from our partners, I would recommend, I would urge our audience to visit the Middle East and Europe webpage on Global Ministries. We post updates and positions, statements from our partners very regularly. We provide advocacy opportunities, action alerts, and those kinds of things. We also provide ways for people to support our partners who are responding in heroic ways, really, to the realities on the ground. So, just this week, today I posted a statement from Kairos, Palestine, one of our partners based in Beit Zahor near Bethlehem, on a statement in response to President Trump's remarks at the press conference a couple of days ago. I also have posted an update from the Middle East Council of Churches Department of Service to Palestinian Refugees, updating on their work in Gaza, which has continued throughout the 16 months. So there are ways to learn about how our partners are engaging and how we're able to support and amplify their voices.
And I just put a link in the chat to both the Middle East page that Peter recommended, and also a Join Us page where you can sign up for Global Ministries emails, and you can note the areas that you're interested in receiving targeted information. One that I love to receive every month is the Third Thursday Action Alert, which is Middle East related and shares a specific way that you can call on your member of Congress for different policies.
And I would also add, so of course, join us, Global Ministries. And every week we have a different weekly prayer that focuses on a particular partner or country or region. So I encourage you to incorporate those into either your personal practices or your church practices. Those are there. But also think about diversifying your news sources. Where do you get your news from, especially your global news from? And so think about finding a news organization that's based in the country that you're interested in, right? And see that different sorts of things. I mean, in terms of the breadth of their coverage, I really like The Economist because they are all over the world and they cover places that you don't always hear about, although I don't always agree with their coverage. You at least get some of that more information. But I definitely, yeah, because the news organizations that are based here in the United States tend to focus heavily on the United States. And so, I might not think about where you're getting your news, put it that way.
So what I hear you saying, Becca, is go past page 1 on your Google search. Yes.
And think about people and organizations you trust and the news that they're sharing and where that's coming from, right? So I follow Jewish Voice for Peace on Instagram, and seeing what they're sharing and the organizations that they trust makes me trust them as well.
Oh, I love that. And I want to say, yes, a link will be sent out. A follow-up email is forthcoming. It will share a number of the links that were mentioned today, as well as where to purchase the book, either directly from Chalice Press or your local bookstore. We invite you to purchase from your local bookstore. For the love of all things holy, purchase from your local bookstore. And then also, yes, there are invitations. You can reach out to any of the folks here, but Peter in particular, who said you can reach out and talk to me directly about speaking. If you asked a question and we did not get to it today, and you're still wanting an answer, please do send that to me in an email. That will be the email comes from me, the follow-up email comes from me. Send me an email and I'll be sure to direct it. I really just want to thank each of you. Like, really, I know that we talked about something completely different last year. And you mentioned that this book was forthcoming, and I could not wait until this opportunity to talk to you. And the fact that you have been able to help bring in other folks, some of the other authors and contributors to this really important book, to speak with us throughout 2025. It is just such an honor and a pleasure. I want to thank you for building those relationships, for being a model of what it is to be a loving Christian in our world today. I just want to thank each and every one of you so much. And for those of you who have joined us online live, or will join us later at a recording, thank you. Thank you for believing in Nurture the Soul as a source of nurturing not only your soul, but your brain and your spirit and all of that stuff too. We're here for each and every one of you every Thursday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I look forward again to being with you next Thursday, February 13th, for another series. We're going to do part 1 of a 3-part series where we are joined by 3 elders of the Afro-Christian tradition. And they're going to share with us how the African spirit of Ubuntu has sustained their lives and why it offers a source of nurture for our souls at such a time as this. Each session will center on one of the values of Ubuntu, and we will discover the ways in which we can put our collective wisdom into practice. And I forgot to ask any of you, but I would love to turn it over to you to give us a benediction. Who would like to send us forth?
Thank you. If you permit, again, referring to one of our authors, the question comes up often about hope, and especially in times like this, and we don't want to, diminish the idea of hope in a time of deep crisis, but also hope is such an important part of our faith. I think often of Mitri Raheb again. I've referred to him before. He emphasizes that hope is a verb. Hope is what you do today. That is his quote. So I urge you in this time, and especially as we move toward Ash Wednesday and Lent, and then Holy Week and Easter, as we begin to reflect on hope in that context, to think about hope as a verb, hope as action. Hope is what we do today.
Siblings in Christ, if you are moved by this conversation, if what's been offered here has helped enhance your ministry or has nurtured your soul for the journey, please consider donating to the annual fund of the United Church of Christ by texting UCC to 41444. Your support will help to provide programs like this, which are an essential part of our ministries in the United Church of Christ. Thank you for your support. Be blessed on your journey and know that you are not alone. We are holding you in prayer. Amen.